I received an email this week. No, it was a Facebook message. I'm sorry. From someone, and they mentioned, well, Pastor Joe, looks like your sermon has already been written for you, or you already know what you're going to talk about this Sunday, right? And they were right. There's no way I can't come up here and talk about what's going on in Ukraine. I mean, I'm sure you would feel completely disconnected from me this morning if I started talking about something else, right? But it's tough. You know, I thought about it all week. What in the world am I going to say? Those weren't my exact words. What am I going to say? What is there to say, right? I spent some time with one of the nurses on the floor at one of the hospitals where I serve as a chaplain, and I knew that her parents were refugees from the Middle East. They had to flee their country many years ago, and they were political refugees. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to find out how her parents are doing. You know, just hearing about what's going on might bring up a lot of really strong feelings. And so I asked her, you know, how's your mom and dad in light of everything? And she said, well, as a matter of fact, my cousin is in Ukraine right now. He lives there. I said, what? She said, yeah, he's trying to get out right now as I just got off the phone with him. He's in the car with some people he doesn't even know, and they're just driving to Poland right now, trying to get out. And then she said something that really hit me. She said, in the past 2 days, he has developed a stutter. Now, nothing wrong with stuttering. I don't mean that. Or any kind of speech, whatever. Nothing wrong at all. Here's a man who, because of the trauma, because of his terror, it's not even fear, it's terror. He's having a hard time talking. He's having a hard time speaking. He's so afraid. I just stayed with that, Dave, for the rest of the day. I just kept thinking about what he was going through. The violence. And then I thought about the violence in our own backyard. We talked about it today, this morning. So many people just in the Richmond area. So many children. They wake up every morning vulnerable to violence. Whether it's violence in the home, which Elijah, you're going to teach us in a couple of weeks about that, doing some great work. Or violence in the neighborhoods. I was with a loved one recently. We were driving through Richmond, and she grew up in the South Bronx. And she gets a little anxious when she's unfamiliar with certain neighborhoods, and she can tell that there may be a little bit of danger. There's a certain anxiety that it provokes in her because she grew up always having to make sure everything was safe. Making sure that you don't repeat the same patterns every day because people will be watching. Somebody might be watching you. There's a way in which you grow up. When you grow up in an area that's prone to violence, it's just different. So maybe this crime in Ukraine, let's call it a crime, this violent crime that's taking place in Ukraine, maybe it can shake some of us out of our indifference to violence. Because I can become very indifferent if it's not affecting me. Maybe it can shake us out of our indifference to our own vulnerability to violence, that we all have the capability of acting with violence. It's in every human being. Some of us are luckier than others. Maybe it will make us a little less indifferent to the violence in our own backyard in Richmond, as Risk was confronting the mayor at the number of homicides since he's been in the office, and how he hasn't done a damn thing about it, right? We can't be indifferent to that, church. Or the violence in homes that affect children. Different forms of violence. So maybe that might be something, I don't want to say good, but something that can come out of this situation, that we might be less indifferent to violence. The folks with this demonic, if you will, this man who, I don't want to call him a demonic, I don't want to label him as something, but he had demons, right? I mean, this is a great image of someone who has grown up in a society that has oppressed him. And the stresses of society, the stresses of violence, the stresses of poverty, the stresses of being an outsider, unclean, whatever it was, these outside forces drove him to where he is today. This is really an image of society more than anything, not just one man, but the sins of society. And what struck me most this week about this story is how indifferent everyone else was. He was clearly in need of love. He was clearly in need of care and clearly in need of compassion. And he was all alone because everyone else was indifferent to his suffering, except for Jesus. Jesus does what Jesus always does, right? Amen? He goes right in there. Right where the man is. And I have this image of Jesus loving him and caring for him. And when the man was healed, did you hear it? Did you hear it in the story? The neighborhood asked Jesus to leave. Isn't that something? Dave, isn't that something? Get out of here, Jesus. We need that man to be sick. So maybe this experience that we are going through, that we're hearing about, and we all have our different perspectives on this based on our lived experience of how we react to this and respond to this. We have loved ones in the congregation whose loved ones, they are in the military. In Poland. Helen, sorry. Hope that's okay. Okay. Helen's great nephew is in Poland. He's in danger in many ways. Maybe this will shake us out of our complacency to violence. Perhaps our church will become more involved in confronting and combating violence in the Richmond area. You know, I just can't help but think of, and I wrote about it a little bit in the newsletter, I just can't help but think about the folks in Ukraine. I traveled there 20 years ago on a mission trip. It was a short-term mission trip, and I was a second-year seminary student. We brought a bunch of medical supplies, dental supplies. We were there to spend time with the churches, the home churches, and it was just from the very beginning, it was a surreal experience. Like first time in my life where I was in an area where I did not speak the language, and so it was just getting off the airplane into the airport, it was just like, whoa, I was blown away. Culture shock right from the beginning. But I was struck by the poverty. I'd never seen poverty like that. The street children, the children on the street. We went to like 3 or 4 orphanages. There was an area in the orphanage in the bottom area where the kids just came right off the street and had to shave their head because of lice. Then they were given a warm shower. And we offered them Christmas candy, these kids, and they said, no, we just want bread and water. I was like, whoa, what kid turns down candy? But the love and gratitude these kids had, I'll never forget their faces. Then we stayed out in the countryside, and you talk about simple living. These folks didn't even have a toilet. You had to use the outhouse. And it was the simple things in life that they were simple. This one guy, he drove me like 10 minutes away just so I could see his chickens, his cows, his pigs in the barn. And he showed me, he's showing me this. And I was blown away by the simplicity, but the joy on his face. That this is what he owned, this is what he had, and he wanted me to see it. And the perseverance of the Ukrainian people, how they persevered. I remember this one woman who, it was 20 years ago, I'm sure she's made the transition into God by now because of her age at that time. And she was so warm and compassionate, and she gave us everything she could to make sure that we were comfortable in her home, blankets and everything. And then she brought out all her food and set it down at the table, probably most of what she had, and she just wanted us to feel the love. And I remember her showing us a picture on the wall where she was baptized. She was in the water being baptized. And she spoke to the translator who told us that she was so happy to no longer be under Russian rule. That was also very important to her, to feel that freedom. But it was that picture of her being baptized. I still remember that picture and how happy she was to show us. Going there changed me because I constantly questioned, where is God in all of this? When I saw the kids coming off the street, where is God? Saw the poverty, where is God? Where is God? Where are you, God? Of course, I was reading Marcus Borg and Henry Now and all about compassion. And I left Ukraine 20 years ago with a conviction that has never left me. That is, God is so close to us, closer than our very breath, and that God experiences life with us, and that God even experiences the depths of suffering with us. Where is God? God is in the suffering, going through it with us, loving us through it, holding us in God's embrace constantly. That's where I believe God is. So where is God in all of this conflict, this crime, this violence? I believe that God is suffering, especially with the Ukrainians. Especially with the Ukrainians. That God is suffering with them. And that God is loving them through this. And holding them in God's loving embrace. That's what I believe. So, church family, may we never be indifferent to the violence within ourselves, the violence in our communities, to the violence in homes. May we never be indifferent to the violence in our world. And may we continue to open our lives and our hearts to the suffering of humanity, including our own. Amen.